innovation rather than invention.
See, we're streaming live on YouTube as well, so that's fun today.
Okay. I'm gonna start recording and let people in.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll just let the attendees filter in. For those of you on YouTube, hello and welcome to our Pagoda Projects Leadership webinar. I'm very excited to be streaming around the world. I know some of you are probably based in the UK and Europe. I'm calling you or doing this interview from Chengdu in China, so quite a long way away from the UK if you're listening from there. I've got my colleague Danny on the call today, Daniel Miller. Danny, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself briefly, where you are and in the world would be interesting.
Yeah, sure. So good evening from Taipei. I'm speaking from Taipei. So yeah, I'm the Taipei branch manager for Pagoda Projects over here, and really happy to be joining Paul and Peter on this leadership session.
Awesome, thanks Danny, pleased to have you, and it gives me a great honor to introduce Peter Ward, Dr. Peter Ward I should say. Would you like to introduce yourself, Peter, and just give us a little bit of input on who you are?
Sure, thank you Paul. Yeah, Peter Ward. I run a company called Sunrise Consulting, and I spend my time working with spend a lot of my time working with students, graduates, helping them to find their dream job, if you like. So everything from coaching and mentoring through CVs and LinkedIn profiles, everything that helps people to move forward in their careers, in their jobs. So that's me, Peter.
Awesome, Peter. We're very happy to have you. I think we're going to pick into all of that a little bit later on. I think what I would say is that there's a great alignment between Pagoda Projects and what you're doing. That's definitely our aim as well. And I'm sure that some of the people that are either listening back to this later or are listening live now will kind of feel that's kind of our company ethos as well, is really to support people, coach them through and move forward with their careers and hopefully provide that stepping stone to a bright future. So I thought perhaps we can just go around the room just a little bit to talk first of all about what is leadership. Okay, so that's the first question. So Danny, do you want to take that one first, and then I'll go to Peter, and then I'll give you my input. I'll come last. So I think that's going to be easiest.
I reckon, wow, that's a big question. So in my eyes, leadership is, for me, taking responsibility for a certain project or a direction and communicating the certain roles to members of the team, and being, so though in general terms, it's basically being a very good communicator, taking responsibility for the group for a shared goal. So yeah, that's my general definition.
Okay, very good. So shared responsibility, some good points there. What about you, Peter? How would you define leadership?
Well, I think what Dan's just said is absolutely right. To me, a leader is somebody who people will follow. And therefore I see leadership as giving people a reason to follow you, and you know, you have to be prepared to stand forward and to inspire, and I'm sure that then it's really important to be able to take that responsibility to do that work. But yeah, I always think a leader is somebody who people will follow. That's almost a definition of being a leader. So that's where I'm coming from, I guess.
No, I think that's a very good point from both of you. I totally agree. I guess we can go a little bit further and maybe dig down into what are the characteristics of a leader then. For me, I would say, just because I know you guys went first on that one, I'll take a little bit of a lead on this one. I think it's really about being authentic. That's something I've taken away from a lot of reading, a lot of the people that I've admired as leaders, coaching I've had. I think it's really about being authentic. And I think that there's ways that you can show leadership in any area, whether that's as an intern, whether that's as a manager, whether that's as a CEO. I think there's different ways that you can show that that leadership. But I think what really helps to get people to follow you and come on that journey with you is about them knowing that you are being authentic with them, that you are sharing your feelings, that you are being open with them, whether that's through communication, whether that's by the way that you deal with conflict, whatever it might be. I've always found that authentic leadership is kind of the one that I found the easiest to follow. I don't know if you'd agree on that, Danny and Peter, in terms of that being a trait that you look for, and perhaps you can build on that and give me some other traits that you think do help someone to be a good leader or an effective leader.
If I can just make a couple of comments here, I would say humility. I mean, I agree with you absolutely. Authenticity is absolutely vital, and people will immediately realize if a leader is not. But I would look at humility as being an important trait. When I look back at some of the leaders that I have had the privilege of working with, it's always been people who are willing to admit that sometimes they don't know, and they're willing to learn. And I think that gives you the opportunity to be very respectful. You respect them for that. And yeah, so I would suggest humility, readiness to listen, readiness to learn, while at the same time obviously showing confidence. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, but I think a leader has to be somebody who you feel confident in, as well as the other things. So a couple of things I would suggest there.
I think you're spot on there, Peter, with a lot of what you're saying, and it leads me quite nicely onto the growth mindset that we'll talk a little bit about later. But Danny, maybe we can hear your thoughts on this as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So in my eyes, sort of leadership traits can be quite culturally relative. So for instance, in China, and especially in Taipei here, a leader and the so-called followers, they subscribe to certain rules. So they appreciate the hierarchy. There's a seniority in that, and that affects the communication between a person in charge and a person following. In the West, a lot of new startups and organizations like to pride themselves on a horizontal management structure where a leader empowers someone to be almost in the same role as them and have an equal voice. But I think in both cases, clarity in communication is key. Clarity in roles within that team is key.
Thank you, Danny, for bringing in the cultural dimension to that. I think that's so important. So I'm just going to take a short break to launch a couple of polls now people are on the call. So the first one I've got is just to understand perhaps why people are listening into us today. So I'm just going to launch this poll now. So just a quick question. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I will share the results with you in a second. So just waiting for, if you should see on your screen a little bit of a voting things. Okay, so it seems like most people are here to develop leadership skills, which is great, because I think that's where Peter will be able to help us out. Okay, cool. A few people saying that they've got the growth mindset, which is great. I think we'll get onto the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. This is something I've become slightly obsessed with, especially with the reading that I've done on marginal gains, which I'll also talk to Peter about later. So the second poll I've got is just to kind of, I'll just share the results there for you. You can see how people are how people are answering. Okay, and then I've got a second poll. I'll just go down to that one to launch. I'm just interested where everyone is in the world. So I think most should be in the UK, but I'm not certain on that. Most of the people listening back, I know, will be in Australasia, but I'm glad to see that there's somebody that is joining from Australasia. Obviously, I can't see the attendees on YouTube, but that's great. So we've got, Europe is just winning. Europe and UK neck and neck with one person in Australasia. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I know it's getting quite late over in Australia and New Zealand, so we do appreciate you joining us this evening. Hope you're enjoying the session so far. Okay, and there's the results of today's poll. Okay, so just with that interlude, I wanted to go back to you, Peter. And since you're our guest today, I would wonder if you would mind just sharing a little bit more about your journey and how you got to this point, why you set up a consultancy business, and how you kind of help people shine. I know that's something that you talk about with your work. So if you could just give us a brief history of you, that would be great, and kind of how you ended up at this point. I'm really interested about your journey and how you got there.
You know, I spend time coaching people for interviews, and the question that is always the most terrifying for interviewees is, tell me about yourself, because it's something that you can get very wrong. So let me see if I can get it right. I left school having a very clear idea of what I wanted to do, and then I didn't do it. I ended up trying to get into a different subject at university and failing. I ended up doing something that had never occurred to me before, and then at the end of my degree, I was a bit lost, and I ended up going into IT. And from there, I started right at the bottom. Do not be afraid of starting low down. It's something that can give you a grounding for the future that you can't get in other ways sometimes, I think. So from there, I moved into consulting services, sales. I moved into program management, global programs, and that sort of thing. I spent 5 years. I was really fortunate to have very understanding management who allowed me to spend a lot of my time working on projects in Africa. Africa is very dear to me, and I spent time working on healthcare projects particularly, and supply chain projects in various parts of sub-Saharan Africa. But I realized that things were not going exactly the way I wanted, and I ended up moving out of IT, and I took a PhD in healthcare in Africa. And based on that, I thought, oh well, now I will get a job looking at healthcare in Africa, and I didn't. I still hoped that I might, but I didn't. So I moved into what I've been doing informally for years and years, and that's coaching and mentoring, which I've been doing in the company I work for many years, and decided to take that on full time. And so over the last 5 years or so, that's what I've been doing. And I have to say that I love it, and it's not totally dissimilar to working in Africa, if you like, because there I was working to change people's lives, and now I work to change people's lives, to make them shine, as I say, which I see as putting them in their best light, and that's however they need to market themselves into the job market, or also into new roles, to position themselves more effectively for whatever it is that they want to aim for. So that's where I came from, and that's what I'm doing now in a nutshell.
Okay, Peter, well, there's a lot to unpack there. Thank you very much for the brief history of you. I think you answered it very well. What I would say is there's a couple of things I just wanted to pick out of that, which are common themes on the guests that we have on these events. One is that you didn't really take the path well traveled, and it seems like you kind of fell into a few of the opportunities along the way. That's something I can definitely relate to, and perhaps Danny can as well. I know Danny has lived in mainland China. He's now over in Taiwan. He spent time in the UK. Myself, I've also spent time in China. I've worked in Vietnam. I've spent time in Thailand. It's, you know, there's a few different steps that we take, which are always adventures. I think I'd see that a lot of careers, the best ones, the ones with the best stories are very full of adventure. And I think it's interesting that you brought up that you failed at some point, maybe with the studying first up. Like, how did you cope with that failure? And do you feel that it's led you down a better path? Because I think failure is something that comes up a lot, and people are maybe scared of, especially at the start of their careers, to take that jump, to take that chance. I'd like to just unpack that one a little bit and ask you how you dealt with that situation.
I won't say that I welcomed it. It was not the situation that I wanted to be in, and yet there was a sense of relief, actually, that things had not gone exactly the way that people expected, the way that I expected. It's not a disaster. There are other ways forward. And it's a case of embracing where you are, I think, and moving forward from there, rather than bemoaning the fact that things didn't quite work out the way that you wanted them to. I would say that failure is never pleasant, but I would also say that failure is relative. And you know, some people might look at you and think, "Ah, you've failed." Other people will look and say, "Well, you know, you tried, and there are other things that you can do which you will be successful in." And you know, we talk about failure as a word. Other people might view it as a learning opportunity. I think that's a very positive way of looking at it, and it's not always the thing that comes immediately to mind straight after something not working out right. But I think in reality, it's often very true. It's a learning opportunity that says, right, that's not the way, let's find another way.
I think you're so true, Peter. And it's there's a lot of emotion which is always attached to a failure, especially at the time. I think hindsight is a wonderful thing. Something that we've tried to do internally at Pagoda is really to look at when things don't go quite right, to look at the learning outcomes, like how can we grow as a business, how can we improve on what we're doing, and quite quickly move past the kind of the failing, if you like, and turn that into a positive. Because I think it's very difficult to do that in the moment, but I think it's something that you can develop, a skill. It's something that I'm still learning at, but I found that my kind of emotion around a failure probably lasts a lot less than it used to, and I think I'm working on that. I guess I wanted to go to Danny a little bit. Danny, I think we haven't heard much from you yet. Do you want to share your story a little bit? Because you have a lot of interesting work that you've done over the last few years, especially in Taipei, and I'm keen for everyone to know a little bit more about your successes and what you've been up to, especially relating to the entrepreneurship that you've done and the leadership that you've shown as well.
Sure, no problem at all. Like Peter, I chose a degree because I wanted a profession related to that degree. So I graduated in international relations, and I hope to be a diplomat. The way I went down that path was I worked in Chengdu for the British Chamber of Commerce, which is essentially trying to promote UK businesses in China and vice versa to create trade links. And from that role, I gained a lot of responsibility. That's actually where I met Paul first. Essentially, I was organizing networking events. I was organizing essentially events with the British consulate as well, where Paul would attend and network. So from that early on in my career, I was thrust into you know, quite a lot of responsibility. And your initial reaction when you get thrust into that is panic. You sometimes panic, but you realize, you know, that panic is just an emotion. It'll fade away, and your stage fright will gradually go. So that was an invaluable experience. When I luckily got the job to become Taipei branch manager in Taiwan, I really wanted to flex my volunteering muscles. I wanted to give back to the community in Taiwan, especially international students in Taiwan who had found it very, very hard to find a career out here in Taiwan, apart from English teaching. So I co-founded an organization called All Hands Taiwan, which was meant to make professional networking accessible to all. So beforehand, I worked at the chamber. Networking was sort of you know, for not so much the privileged few, but for diplomats, for heads of business, for leaders themselves. But I wanted to start events that would be accessible to international students, people who are unemployed, for them to gain access to information, to give them a bit of guidance to their own careers. And that's one of those things. When leadership happens, for me, no one else is doing the thing you want to do or you want to contribute, and that can be a very invigorating experience, because like, oh, I'm on my own here. I need to push it somehow to a certain direction for this to gain attraction, to gain attention. Same thing with my football teams out here in Taipei. Being a captain or being a manager of a football team, it's when no one else wants to do it, and you have a great opportunity in that stage to say, right, I'm going to do something about it, whether you like it or not. If anyone objects, please object, but I'm going to take this role because it needs to get done. So yeah, that sort of encapsulates my last few years.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Very interesting to hear that. So I want to go back to you, Peter, for this one. Let's talk a little bit about Sunrise Consulting, what you do, and the people that you work with in particular. I'm interested about how you help people shine. I'm quite interested in what you do and what that process looks like. Is it the same for everyone, or is it a very personalized service? And what challenges have you faced along the way of setting this up?
Whoa, big questions. Challenges of setting up. Let me start there first of all. I first set up my business about 19 years ago and ran it as a spare time activity for most of that time. That was not difficult. That was quite trivial. You know, running a spare time company is easy enough. Turning it into a business that supports you is another matter altogether. And I think, having talked to many business people running their own businesses, it's not unusual to find it quite challenging to get known, to become visible, to become trusted, and a lot of that comes ultimately from the people you work with actually giving you testimonials and things. A lot of my work initially came from personal recommendation. So that's really nice when somebody's willing to say, hey, come to Peter, he was good for me, sort of thing. And that still happens. And it's very encouraging when it does. But actually, what do I do? Well, my work ranges from coaching graduate students through to coaching CEOs. I work with a number of organizations that bring me clients, if you like. So I have my own personal clients, and then I work with other organizations that bring me students, bring me executives at various levels to coach. Having said that, a lot of the work that I do with the executive side is in CVs, LinkedIn profiles, before we get into the executive and career coaching side of things. And I see your LinkedIn profile as a marketing document, effectively. It's saying this is me. It's not necessarily a selling document. It's not going to get you a job, but it's a positioning statement. And it has to be really strong, because everybody who applies for a job now, the recruiter will look at your LinkedIn profile and say, is this person serious? So if there's nothing there, you will get discounted. So a strong LinkedIn profile is really important. You then have a CV, which is also marketing, but maybe sales, as you put it in front of somebody. And in both of those, it's important that they reflect you in your skills, but you as a person. And so to that extent, it's a very personalized thing that we do, actually teasing out the achievements. So many people are good at describing what they do, and some are good at describing what their responsibilities are, but many people struggle to say, and this is what I achieved, these are my successes. And that's really why people buy you. They buy you because you have been successful for somebody else, and it's very personalized in that sense. And then there's coaching, which I do a lot of with students especially. And I love working with students. The energy and the enthusiasm that they bring to their work, to their lives, is just so invigorating. And I love working with students. And we talk about everything. We talk about jobs, of course, but you know, I've coached people on how to make the CSSA accepted by their student union. I've coached people on statistics. I'm not a brilliant statistician, but on this occasion I was better than they were. I do a lot of work with students with their master's dissertations. So that's another area of coaching that I'm involved in. So, you know, all these things position you to shine, that is, to look your best. So that might be a CV and a cover letter and a LinkedIn profile. It might be the way you perform an interview. It might be the way you view yourself. But it's all making somebody the best they can possibly be in front of the people that they need to be in front of. I guess that would be a short definition of what I try to do.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to hear what you're doing. I'm sure it's an extremely valuable service that you're providing. I think it's something that I just wanted to pick into a couple of things you said. Certainly the LinkedIn is very important for anybody that's listening that does not have a LinkedIn profile. Go and get a LinkedIn profile, connect with me. It's so important today. I've just been recruiting for a couple of positions, and yeah, I will check LinkedIn profiles, actually even more than the CV. In fact, it tells me often more about the person than the CV does, which they do look the same often if you're looking at 100 CVs at the moment. I just think what Peter says at the moment is important for everybody in the audience to understand, because you're now competing, whether you like it or not, with a lot more people than you were pre-pandemic. A lot of positions are becoming remote. A lot of companies are looking at hiring more freelancers, people in different locations. Several large corporates also, you know, people like Spotify, Google, Amazon, they're all looking at hiring the best teams around the globe. And that means that you're no longer competing with just the people within a 10-mile radius of the physical office. You're now in a global recruitment drive, and that's not to put you off. I think that gives you even more opportunities, gives you better opportunities to find the perfect job for you and the perfect company. I think something that I would encourage everyone to always go after is to go and work for a business that you believe in, and you believe in, and you match and align well with their kind of values and mission statement, rather than the salary. I know that's quite a common thing to say, go and work for somebody. I know that salary is an important thing to think about, but in terms of motivation, once you get the salary that you want, you need something else to motivate you to come to work and to feel invigorated. And I, like you, Peter, I would say that young people and working with students and graduates on our programs is incredibly inspiring for myself, just to be able to coach them through when things are tough, or just to understand their journeys and what they're trying to get out of our programs. I think that makes our mission in terms of what we want to do and the service that we want to provide to young people very easy to do that. It's very motivating when you're kind of supporting people and looking to give them that, you know, we rise by lifting others, if you like. So I think it's very, very important for us to kind of do this work that you're doing and the work that we're doing as well. Danny, like, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on what has been said so far. Is there anything you want to chip in here at this point? And then I'll come back to you, Peter, with a question about the difference between coaching and mentorship. I think this is something I don't have clear in my own head, so I'd like to see if you've got an answer for us on that one.
Yeah, my question for you, Peter. I'm very curious when you had a realization that you had certain leadership skills during your career or during your academic career. When did it sort of click and go, right, I think I'm sort of a leader. I can lead, I can project manage or anything like that. When was the first realization?
Okay, can I take those in order? Coaching versus mentoring. They blur. I have to say they blur. And I would say that many coaches also do mentoring, even though coaching is not meant to be mentoring. Coaching is very much helping somebody to move forward from where they are, but help them to see themselves and put the effort in for themselves to move forward. So you are reflecting them, you are encouraging them to think and to take responsibility for themselves as they move forward. Mentoring is more supportive. Mentoring is bringing your own your domain skills to bear, I would say. So you would find a mentor who can help you in something. You know, it might be something technical, it might be something directly to do with your job, and you need somebody to help you. I think that's probably where mentoring comes. They will also expect you to do things for yourself, because mentoring has a lot of coaching in it. But they are two different disciplines, and as I say, they sometimes blur. Now, in terms of the second question, when did I first realize that I could be a leader? If I look back on it, I realized that the first time I was a leader was when I was running a project in IT. I hadn't been working for very long, maybe only a couple of years, but I had this opportunity to create something that nobody had created before, to do something that nobody had ever done before. And I was happy to step up and make that happen and inspire people to come along with me in the journey. And we worked together very closely. They put a lot of effort in, and they saw that I put a lot of effort in. And I think that was inspiring. There were times when I was working 5 days and 3 nights a week to make this happen. And they also are willing to come in and work alongside me through the night. I think it was an inspirational thing that we were trying to do. And I think that if you can share that inspiration, it drives success. So I guess that was the first time that I ever felt like I was being a leader. So an IT project that was completely unique at the time.
That is an excellent answer, Peter. I really liked that. I think something you mentioned, it's a journey, and inspiring people to go on that journey with you, I think is just key things that we mentioned right at the start in terms of being authentic and inspiring and communicating and getting people along for the ride with you. I think it is always a journey. I think nothing ever goes completely smooth in business or in life. You do have those hiccups, those roller coaster moments where things feel a little bit upside down, or maybe you're even going to come off a track. But I think it's really great if you can inspire people around you to come on that journey with you. It's always more fun to travel with others, right? So I think it's really interesting to hear that. I just wanted to pick into your work that you did in Africa, if you don't mind, if that's okay. And I'm interested to hear if you've picked up any leadership styles, like Danny mentioned, that things are a little bit different where we're based over in Asia. I've certainly found that as well. There's almost a hierarchical relationship where it becomes that the leader is almost like a parental figure almost actually in the company sometimes, and they will be responsible for not just the work but also for issues that might be going on in the personal life as well. And it's there's very much an upwards trajectory in China in terms of how we look at management and leadership styles. But for Pagoda, for example, where we have a mixed cultural team, it does work better for us to be more flat and to have a kind of a less hierarchical system that we employ here. But I wanted to ask you if you've noticed anything in your travels, or has anyone inspired you particularly? It doesn't need to be someone particularly well known, but has anyone inspired you in their leadership that they showed you?
A couple of things there. In terms of Africa, I've worked in Ghana, Tanzania, Zambia, did some work in Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, obviously South Africa. What I found in sub-Saharan Africa, I guess, is a lot of what you're describing in mainland China and perhaps Taiwan as well. There's a hierarchy. And an expectation that people will follow you based on your position in the hierarchy. So I think that can generate a feeling of, I don't want to go in this direction, but I'm being forced to, which I would say is not really demonstrating leadership. It's just purely relying on your position in the organization. And I've seen also a senior person bypassing their report to go straight to the next level of report, and I find that it demeans the person in the middle because they no longer have the leadership responsibility for their people, because somebody just the boss comes in from the top and makes their own decisions. And I don't think that's a healthy thing to do in an organization. In terms of inspiration, I've worked with some very inspiring people, people who you would follow to the end of the earth, really. And I've met one or two of those as well, but you don't get very many. One of the guys would be when I was working in Tanzania, the sponsor of the project that I was running. It was one of those people who you would follow, and he was very quiet, very respectful of his team, always willing to listen, but inside there was a real heart of iron, I guess you would say. He knew where he was going, he knew the direction he wanted the project to take, and he was determined to make that happen, but in the calmest, quietest, gentlest way that you could imagine. And I think that was very inspiring. That would be one person, obviously well known in his field, but unknown outside his company, I would guess. But yes, very, very inspiring guy.
Wow, great story. Peter, we've had a question in the chat, so I don't know if one of us wants to take this one on. My question from Lynn, thank you very much for your input, Lynn. We'll welcome any questions that come through. How can I show leadership as an entrepreneur or freelance worker? Okay, that's a very interesting one. So maybe somebody that doesn't employ a lot of employees or doesn't have a huge team, I guess.
Well, I'm in exactly that position. I have a team of one, and that's me. So how do I show leadership in that role? Well, I think it's, in one sense, it's impossible because there's nobody to follow you in your organization. But if you look beyond that, then there are ways of demonstrating leadership in the organizations you come into contact with, whether they are the client you're working with, or a voluntary organization you're plugged into, or a networking group that you are involved in. I mean, I have become involved in a networking group where you get the opportunity to actually present to people your direction, your history, the things that you're interested in, things that will help motivate others and educate others. And you know, in one sense, as an individual with only responsibility for yourself, you are not a leader in the traditional sense, but there are many ways that you can demonstrate leadership as you move beyond yourself into other organizations. And you know, many times a company will bring you in order for you to show leadership. You know, many companies, they don't want just people who will take a job as a services person. They still exist, but fundamentally people are looking for you to come in and take some leadership roles. So don't feel that just because you're a freelance worker or a single person entrepreneur, there's no opportunities. There are, but they are in a different position to perhaps if you're running your own company.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And in terms of entrepreneurship, if you're starting your own movement or own company, I think it applies to really great leadership is where your role is to see the bigger picture, to have a vision and to communicate that clearly to your team. So your team will have different parts and hopefully they all have their own skill set. And you have to communicate really clearly whether one, they share the same vision as you do, and that's quite a democratic process. Is this the thing that you want as well? And then also ask them, well, this is how I see you contributing to that vision. This is how we're going to get there. And this is this part of the engine room. So defining that early on, I think shows great leadership in being an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur, you know, it's asking someone to go above and beyond structure and stability. It's to go take a leap of faith with you. So I think that's the most inspiring thing. But if you're a freelancer as well, I reckon, you know, managing yourself or leading yourself is one of the hardest things to do as a freelancer. Making sure that you stick to a certain routine, for instance, making sure that you don't say to yourself, oh, you know, I can not do this important project today, I can do it tomorrow. Being really strict on yourself, and also taking, you know, a meta and a view above and say, right, am I the person that someone would like to work with? Am I taking responsibility? Am I being proactive? Am I accountable? And that's one of the hardest things to apply to yourself, but you sort of have to apply that self and think, right, am I a good team player? And if I work for a company, am I showing enough qualities to be accountable for a project, be responsible and creative at the same time?
Thank you, Danny and Peter. Some great answers there. I guess I'll chip in because I like to talk as well. I mentioned, it's interesting you mentioned how do you show leadership. I think today's topic is really about the mindset of leadership. And I think that can be applied in all levels of a business, whether you're leading a team or whether you're the first employee or whether you're the newest employee. I think a lot of it's about just having a mindset to spot the gaps, which is very important in any career. I think often in any company, things get busy managers get busy, things get dropped, and there is often opportunities, if kind of approached in the right way, to spot those gaps and make suggestions. That for me is the biggest way you can show leadership, is making suggestions and, you know, questioning things, whether it's your own sort of work or whether it's the work of others. If you do it in the right way, it can be very powerful to impact some change. I think for what I would say as well is look for leadership opportunities outside of work. So for example, Danny mentioned a team captain. I organize a badminton club in Chengdu. There's many ways that you can get involved and upskill yourself in those, in pursuits that you like, even if it was organizing the Friday night out for your friends, or organizing the next dinner for people you haven't met for a while. That's leadership. You know, there's leadership that you can show in a social way, that can help you out in the business. And I would say that a lot of the things we're talking about, it's about constantly learning. It's all about incremental change, okay, for yourself. So you don't have to kind of immediately employ a leadership mindset. For me, it's a constant learning. And although that we're at different stages in our career, and obviously Peter has got a lot more experience than myself, I still have quite a significant experience in China, but I still feel like I know less than I did when I first came here. So it's really about, you know, not being too hard on yourself, reading a lot. That would be a big suggestion I have, reading widely, taking ideas of others and really seeing how you can sort of bring them into your own life. On that question, I wanted to ask Danny and Peter if you've got any recommendations. This is a question that came through from our team, actually. I want to know, was there anybody that you would recommend they read, or anything that you listen to, or anything that's inspired you during your time, or you really think would give people some good input, aside from this presentation, of course?
Danny's looking in a different direction, so I think he'd like me to start.
So any book recommendations or podcast recommendations? I know that, Danny, you're extremely well read, so I'm sure you're thinking through the list.
I have to admit that I don't read as many business books and so on as I should. And I look back on a couple of things, actually, and neither of them are directly related to, well, one of them is sort of related to coaching, but neither of them is directly related to what I'm doing at the moment. But let me just pick out one, and that's this one, TA Today. Okay, it's about transactional analysis. A new introduction to transactional analysis by Ian Stewart and Van Joins. Why do I pick that out? Because that was the first, when I read that, that was the first time I started to understand something about myself and my relationship with other people, because it talks at a very simple level about the way that you can behave either as a controlling parent, as an adult, or as a subservient child. And you can think about all your relationships and how you behave in each one of those relationships. And obviously the ideal is it's adult to adult, a sensible, equal conversation between equals. But how often the balance can be tipped, you know, especially with a bad leader, for example. It becomes a controlling parent to a subservient child, whereas we want that sort of relationship. You know, leadership is not dominance, it's not force, it's not you know, it's not forcing you to do things. It's as we've been talking about so much, I think it's inspiring, it's leading rather than dominating. And anyway, that's one book that I found highly valuable, TA Today.
My recommendation, I think, Paul, you've read this as well, Atomic Habits by, I think, James Clear. I don't know if you've read it, Paul, but essentially
I have, yeah,
it's about, yeah. So I found it super useful because I think as a young graduate and as a young professional, I always became very overwhelmed when a consultant or a mentor basically said, have a 3 or 4 or 5 year plan for yourself and plan that out. Having that long-term vision always made me panic. And what this book does is basically encourage you to make systems or little habits. You make good habits or break old ones to make sure that you position yourself using what Pete said before. Essentially, it's a process that you can start any minute, any second in your life. You don't need necessarily to have a 5-year vision of yourself, but you can sort of fix yourself up like someone would fix up a house. If the roof is leaking, you could just patch it up, and you can sort of assess which bad habits you have and make some really good habits, really productive habits, or some really creative habits. So I think seeing the small picture, you don't have to have a vision of you being a CEO of a company. Usually what the CEOs I meet, they say, well, I actually didn't want to. Some leaders actually don't want to be the leader, and that's a key quality. So Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Thank you very much, Danny. And I'll change it up. I will suggest a podcast for you all to download. I would say the High Performance Podcast, which is a UK-based podcast. Very, very useful. They get a lot of people from all different walks of life, mostly sports personalities, actually quite famous people on that one, and just to talk through what high performance means for them, how they motivate themselves, how they lead teams. It's really good because you can pick into people that you're interested about. So somebody that maybe has inspired you from a sports success or something, and then use them to actually listen to an hour of them talking about how they kind of self-manage. It's very, very interesting. A lot of commonalities that you'll find about people don't know what they're doing half the time. A lot of people are faking it, and I think it's very, very refreshing to listen to people speaking quite candidly about how they actually don't know everything, even though it can seem like everything is going really well for them. I think that's the key, is really learning and developing as people, and that's what hopefully by joining the Pagoda Projects program you're doing, and by listening to this webinar, hopefully we're giving you a small nugget of information as well to take on. I guess I wanted to take it back to the audience now a little bit, Peter, and maybe ask if you could give some advice to the people that are listening into this webinar. I think that will be super helpful. Just in terms of how could they shine, and maybe any advice you would have for them as they start their careers, as they kind of move from graduate to employee,
okay,
or maybe to entrepreneur.
Yes, oh, absolutely, yes. Don't underestimate the opportunity of becoming an entrepreneur. Especially when the job market is so tough at the moment. I read recently that in the UK, at least, there are now 91 applicants for every job, for every graduate job. 91. It's really, really tough out there. So don't overlook the opportunity of starting your own business to do something that you are the expert in, because the world needs experts, and if you can deliver from your level of expertise, then that's really really valuable. So that's one piece of advice, I guess. Other advice, well, it's really helpful if you can demonstrate a thread that runs through your CV that leads from where you started to where you want to be. You can go to a company, there are many companies that say, we don't mind what your degree is in, and they're right. You can become a consultant with a degree in classics or sociology or whatever. There's nothing to stop you in that sort of sense. But the company would like to say, well, if you want to be a consultant, what have you done that shows us that that's the direction that you want to go in? And so if you can pull the threads together to demonstrate that this is where you want to go, then I think it's really helpful. So it's not, if you've got a degree in that sort of direction, that's great. A business degree is fantastic. If you haven't, then at least find in your CV the things that that do point you in that sort of direction. So that's one piece of advice in terms of being creative in the way that you look at your history, and build that into what you're doing going forward. And it's amazing how much of what you've done in the past can contribute to you moving forward. So don't overlook anything. It could be voluntary work, it could be internships, obviously, but there's all sorts of things that you've done that you may be able to position as being heading you in the right direction. So that would be one small piece of advice.
Thank you, Peter. It's super valuable, I think. I really appreciate your input on this one. And we've got a couple of questions come in, so I wanted to kind of take them. I think we'll let Danny take the first one. The question is, how can a leader fail? And could you give an example? So I think the first bit is quite easy. Second bit is a little bit harder.
Sure. I'll be short and sweet about this. A lot of the CEOs and founders of startups, their one successful startup has been the consequence of 15 failed startups. So no one gets it right straight away, or even the second time. And it's having the humbleness to actually take the shots. Yes, it will hurt the first few times. It will really smart when you fail, but then you realize, actually, this is the only way for me to know where success is, and for me to find a way. So all the successful businesses you see out there, everything that you can see, it has been 99.5 failure, and to make it in front of you today, as a product, as a thing. So yeah, failures everywhere.
Awesome, Danny. Great answer. I'll give two specific examples I can think of as well. There are literally hundreds out there. One is Starbucks. So when Starbucks were first starting off, they made a huge calculation error on a Brazil coffee crop failing over the winter. So they basically bought tons and tons of coffee from one market in Brazil. And then there was a big frost. I think the first frost in about 50 years in Brazil happened. All of the coffee dried out and they nearly lost the whole business. Obviously, the rest is history. There's also another one, which I'll use, is the example of Nike. A great book to read. Actually, my recommendation for you is a book called Shoe Dog, which is the story of the CEO of Nike, the running company or running shoe company. They have amazing failures along the way, up until the point where about 100 employees are not getting paid. There was tons of failures along the way. And that's a very common thing, and it probably highlights the stress of a CEO. And a lot of these failures, as Danny quite rightly pointed out, do lead to something better. And it is that, I think it goes back to what we were talking about having this growth mindset. And I think that is the key to a leadership mindset, about ensuring that when you do have those failures, you turn them into learning opportunities and then into success. So I think that's the kind of, it's not, I would say that leaders definitely fail. We've got lots of examples, but the key is how you get up from those failures. Now, the second question, I want Peter to have this one. What is the difference between a team leader and a team manager? And then we will just be rolling up to 10 a.m. in the UK. So maybe some closing remarks from both of you as well would be fantastic.
Difference between a leader and a manager. Okay. Ideally, you find them both in the same person, but you don't always. And leadership can be very informal, as I think we've been talking about, where a manager role is a formal position. Managers are not always leaders. Managers can be administrators. They will they'll keep the lights on, if you like. They'll make sure that things are done in the right way, that people are looked after and cared for. They're absolutely essential to an organization, but they're not necessarily, well, the term manager does not imply a leader in any way. That would be my feeling. And you need both, but I think the leadership comes first and the management then comes in to solidify and make real the leadership that is being demonstrated. So you need both, but they are different. In terms of wrap-up comments, I think this is a fascinating subject, and I'd like to thank Pagoda Projects for putting this together. I think it's I hope it's been helpful for those on the call. It's a leadership mindset comes from willingness to lead, which I think comes from having a vision which is inspiring, and which people will come with you on that journey, as I think we've already been talking about. So I would say that if you want to be a leader, it's not done in a vacuum. There is something to lead and something to lead about. And if you get into that position of having something to lead about, you know, if you find yourself with an inspiring vision, then go with it, because people will follow you, and amazing things can happen when a team gets together behind and with an inspirational leader. So go with your gut on that. If you feel that you are ready to inspire, then go with it, because you will find that people will come with you, and together you will achieve amazing things.
That was amazing, Peter. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to get to know you a little bit. And I think we could have done this this session for many hours, and we could have gone backwards and forwards on a lot of other topics. But I think for starters, today's been very good. And Danny, would you like to just maybe close off the event if you like?
Right. Yeah, sure. I guess what I can share is learn by doing. So I'm sure myself, Paul, and Peter can recommend all the books, all the series, all the podcasts. I'll personally recommend The Office, the UK version, to see what a bad leader looks like. But joking aside, I think you can, having a vision as a leader, you can read as many books, you can have as much knowledge as possible, and maybe that makes your vision bigger, and you can see the roadblocks or the potential problems. But there are 10,000 stories with success stories that contradict another 1,000 stories. So you're only going to learn it by actually doing, and actually going to your team members and say, hey, I don't know what the journey is going to be like, but let's muck in together and go for it. So honestly, go out there and fall and fail, because yeah, be a failure. That's my closing remark.
Thanks very much, Danny. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Valentine, for organizing today. Great session. And thank you for all of the attendees around the world and those listening back. Those of you on YouTube as well, hello. It's great to be on YouTube. All right, everyone, I will now close off the webinar. Have a wonderful day, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world.